Hi, my name is Bobby, and we're going to be talking about health hazards in the construction today. We'll go over some of the objectives of today, and first objective is we're going to be able to recognize health hazards and environmental controls. We're going to be able to recognize the requirements and common violations of 29 CFR 1926 subpart D, and then we'll be able to recommend feasible abatement methods for the hazards and violations. First, we're going to talk about medical services and first aid. Provisions must be made before the project begins for prompt medical attention in case of serious injury. Medical facilities readily available and/or person trained in first aid available at the work site. That's a requirement that a lot of people don't know about. Every construction site in the U.S. is required to have at least one first aid certified person on that site. A lot of people aren't aware of that. That is actually an OSHA rule. And readily available means no delay whatsoever. First aid training is the usual means of the compliance. Okay? So medical services and first aid contents in the kit must be checked by the employer before being sent out on each job, and at least weekly, and kept stocked. Also must be able to provide PPE for exposure to blood and other potentially infectious materials, OPIM. A communication system for contacting services is required. 911 is the usual method. And eye wash is required. Eye wash stations in case anyone gets any kind of toxic or corrosive chemicals. Sanitation. Your employer is required to supply an adequate amount of drinking water. Should be some good drinking water in all places of employment. That's also an OSHA rule. And portable containers used for drinking should be tightly sealed and taped preferably. That way people won't be opening them up and sticking their sodas in there and whatnot with their dirty hands. That could cause problems. Water containers should be clearly marked water. So we all know that water is in these containers. Sanitation. Employers are also required to supply their employees with washing facilities maintained in a sanitary condition, such as what you see here. Lavatories should be provided with hot and cold or tepid running water. We're lucky to get cold water on most construction sites, so any kind of water is good, but it's actually a requirement to have hot as well. And we should also keep the area free of rodents and insects. And the toilets must be provided according to the specs in table D1 of our CFR, and that allows for so many employees for each of the porta potties that are put on the site. They should be cleaned on a daily basis. Noise exposure. We need to use either administrative or engineering controls to control the noise levels. And as we know in OSHA or on job sites, that engineering controls means getting rid of the hazard. But on construction sites, we can't always do that, so we resort to PPE. Now, PPE must be provided to reduce the noise exposure to acceptable levels. What are the acceptable levels? Well, sound is measured in decibels. Logarithmic scale, for example, says every 10 decibel increase is 10 times louder to the ears. So basically, OSHA mandates that 85 decibels for 8 hours is the threshold for hearing loss. The OSHA permissible exposure limit, or PEL, is 90 decibels. For more information, you can find it on this website located on the board here. And here's a pretty interesting chart. When I first saw this chart, it was pretty surprising to me. Some of these things I just didn't realize. These tools are tools that we use on a daily basis for the most part when we're doing construction. I know I do. Now, a lot of us use a screwdriver here is really referring to an impact driver, which most of us use on a regular basis. A lot of us use grinders throughout the day. And miter saws, circular saws, reciprocating saws, orbital sanders. These are all tools that are very common to what we do in our industry. And the surprising part of it is, all of these are way over the permissible exposure limit. So basically, it's saying here a circular saw, for example, in just over 2 minutes can cause permanent hearing damage. So, that's something to think about. And I know that I've been working in construction for many, many years, and I've never once thought about putting any kind of hearing protection on my in my ears to protect this hearing. So the circular saw is a big deal, and it's a very loud tool. And as you can see, when it's loaded, meaning when we're actually cutting material, it only takes a little over 2 minutes. And the circular saw, just running the plain circular saw with nothing on it, and just under 15 minutes can cause permanent hearing loss. That's something to think about. Now, ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation is the high energy radiation. It's the type produced by X-ray machines and nuclear power plants. It's capable of causing damage at the cellular level. Okay? Non-ionizing radiation is a low-level radiation such as found in lasers. Any laser eye protection, anti-laser eye protection, must be required, oh my God, for light greater than 0.005. Anti-laser eye protection is required for light greater than 0.005 watts or 5 milliwatts. Gases, vapors, fumes, dust, and mist. The majority of our health hazards come from inhaled substances. On the job site, those weird smells that you smell when somebody's cutting metal studs or cutting wood, those are all actually contaminants. Now, particular contaminants, they can be either dust, airborne solid particles 0.1 to 25 microns, fumes, or airborne solid particles that are less than 0.1 micrometers, and mist are suspended molecules of liquid. Fibers, they're slender, elongated solid particles. Particulate contaminants. Dust, which are airborne solid particles ranging from 0.1 to 25 microns. Fumes are airborne solid particles that are less than 0.1 microns. Mist is suspended liquid droplets, and fiber is slender, elongated solid particles. Now, the respirable particles are particles 10 microns and smaller. They tend to get trapped in the lungs. Larger particles are trapped by tiny hairs in your respiratory tract called cilia, in which they move the contaminants upward so they can be sneezed or coughed out or swallowed. And on note here is smoking immobilizes the cilia so they cannot remove particulate contaminants. Cilia begin to function again after quitting smoking. Gases are formless fluids. Vapor or gaseous form of liquid produced by evaporation or boiling. It's also known as vaporization. Exposure of employees to any materials or substances at concentration above the specified in the threshold limit values of airborne contaminants or 1970 shall be avoided. So, as I said, we must try to use engineering controls first, and that's not feasible. Engineering controls, so we resort to respirators, and they should only be used if engineering controls are not feasible, and they must be suitable for the intended purpose. Respirators must comply with the specs found in 29 CFR 1926.103, which is the same as the general industry standard, 1910.134. And they provide for dust, fumes, mists, vapors, and gases that exist are produced by construction work, blasting operations, dry grinding, dry polishing, buffing, spray booths. The purpose of the HAZCOM standard is to make sure that chemical hazards are identified, classified, and communicated to workers. Information about chemical hazards must be communicated to the employees through labels, safety data sheets, written programs, employee training. Illumination. Talking about illumination on a job site, which is the electrician's responsibility to ensure that the entire job site is illuminated properly. We all got to see what we're doing. It's hard to work in the dark, and it's very dangerous. Now, construction areas, ramps, runways, corridors, offices, shops, storage areas, shall all be lighted to not less than the minimum illumination intensities listed in Table D3 while any work is in progress. Lead is a naturally occurring element that is toxic to humans. Some uses have been banned, but it is still present in many of the construction contexts like bridges, hospitals, and demolition work. How many people have heard of the Golden Gate Bridge? The Golden Gate Bridge is actually painted on a pretty regular basis, and that reddish color that you see is paint that actually contains lead. Now, yes, they still use lead because of the area. There's a lot of salty air in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and the people that actually, the painters doing this, they know that the paint contains lead, so they do take precautions when they're using this product. Okay? Now, as far as the PEL for lead is 50 microns, and the allowable limit is 30 microns. I don't know about you, but I think it's 1.1 micron. Any microns is too many for me to breathe or absorb into my system. Should be specific PPE and hygiene decon requirements. Respirators may be requested below PEL. Medical surveillance, medical removal, specific hazard communication is required. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Well, if you do think of something, you're free to call me anytime, and I'll be glad to help you any kind of way I can. If I don't know the answer, I will find it for you. And on that note, thank you very much. We'll talk to you next time.